Good morning. My name is Lisa DeMarco. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we explore best practices to reduce the risk of a catastrophic cyber attack, protect student data, manage liability, and ensure New York State Ed Law 2D compliance. In a moment, we'll meet our panelists, but first I'd like to introduce Supervisor of NASA BOCES, NASTech and Data Privacy and Security Services, Laura Pollack. Laura will deliver opening remarks. Welcome, Laura.
Okay, I hope it isn't super staticky. I think it's a little staticky. Maybe I'll just keep here. So, good morning. I'm Laura Pollack. I supervise the NASTech. What is that? It's the Nassau Association of School Technologists. That's a group that meets every month, and we do lunch and learns, and we basically just help anyone working in tech in districts find resources and support. In addition, I supervise the Data Privacy and Security Service for Nassau BOCES. Now, we're also a RIC, so that's a little confusing about us. Nassau BOCES is also a RIC. So all the RICs across regional information centers across New York State run their own version of the Data Privacy and Security Service, and we also, all 12 regional information centers work together to deliver support and resources to help data protection officers who were appointed implement the EdLaw 2D Part 121 regulations. So I'm here today. My colleague Barbara Deal is also here today, and some representatives from Eastern Suffolk RIC are also in the back of the room. Hi. And they also support districts in Suffolk. So if you ever need, if you're a data protection officer, or you want to just help your data protection officer, because I'm telling you they need help, just get in touch with us and we can, help you implement those regulations or tell you where you are or tell you what to focus on, whatever you need. In addition, the RICs are having our second annual Data Privacy and Security Conference in Albany on March 29th and 30th. It's a half day on the 29th, a full day on the 30th. We grew the conference. It was small last year, but that's already open for registration, so you can contact your RICs and let them know if you need the information to register, if you want to attend. I believe Stetson and Pupfish will be there representing themselves, and it's going to be amazing. We have a lot of federal and government support. They're going to have people representing their agencies there. It's going to be great, and the vendors are great too. Data Privacy Week is this week, and my colleague Barbara Deal is the one who sends out messages on the RIC1 listserv. You might be a member of that, and you might have received digital blasts from us, and you probably received some information on Data Privacy Week. So I'm going to let Barbara speak to Data Privacy Week because she's the expert in our BOCES on that. RIC, whatever we are.
Thank you. So anybody who is a member of their data privacy service has gotten my emails this week, and I'm trying to time today's email because I'm here, and I'll try and send today's tip out today. But please feel free to share those tips or any of our blasts with your staff. We try and send out information that's important, and feel free if you're on the listserv to share, especially some of the data privacy tips this week, or protecting everybody's own data in addition to the importance of protecting students' data. So that's all I wanted to say. Here's Laura.
Yeah, she's really good at being a champion for Data Privacy Week and for Data Privacy Month, so that's Barbara. Last thing I'll say is you're probably going to get a blast today about a new report that the Center for Infrastructure and Security Agency, CISA, everything has an acronym, it's so hard. They just released a report about K-12 cybersecurity and some resources to help K-12 protect themselves from cyber attacks and threats. So you'll probably be getting some DPSS news on that. And it has a digital toolkit they provided, which is really cool. And I think there's also some, within the digital toolkit, there's even resources for students, a population we kind of forget about sometimes, but they do have email addresses. So we should remember that they need to know what's out there too. So with that, I'm going to hand it back here to Lisa and to the panel. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Laura. And with that, let's welcome our panelists. I'm joined today by Sherry Diamond, partner at Serini and Associates. Joseph Horowitz, Director of Audit and Compliance with Stetson Cyber Group. David Faverio, President and CEO of Pupfish Sustainability Solutions. And Matthew Maynard, partner at the law firm of Gersio & Gersio. Panelists, please briefly introduce yourselves and the credentials that position you as an expert on this topic.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Usually I can project even without a mic. That's from having children. So I'm Sherry Diamond. I am a partner at Serini and Associates, which is an accounting firm located not too far from here in Bohemia. We're a full-fledged accounting firm. I'm part of the education, audit, and consulting practice, basically responsible for overseeing the work that we provide to our public school districts. That's internal audit projects, claims auditing projects, agreed upon procedures, whatever we do. Really, it's related to internal controls. And I'm also working with the private school sector as well, nonprofits, for-profits, you name it. If you're a business, you have to have internal controls, and it's great to work with everybody. I have an IT audit background as well. I was a programmer back in the day. We talked about that. With the panel where I was doing COBOL programming, and I mentioned that the last time. So I was a programmer at Avis when they had their world headquarters in Garden City on Old Country Road. Anybody remember that? Nope. It's like a Shake Shack now. Yep. Okay. Then I went over to the public accounting world, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I did IT auditing and external auditing for them. Then I went into internal auditing at Grumman, so I've been around. Then I got my teaching degree, so I'm actually a certified elementary ed teacher. I'm going to do glass blowing after this is all done. And then I kind of now settled in at Serini and Associates, where I kind of merged all my skill sets, and where I do the internal controls, but in a public accounting environment, so I have multiple types of clients, and really focusing on internal controls. I'm a CIA, which is a certified internal auditor. Sometimes people have a different definition for that, depending on how they feel about me. So that's okay. That is a certification that is designated through the Institute of Internal Auditors. So I'm happy to be here with the panelists. We work very collaboratively together to make sure that our clients are well informed and are addressing risks appropriately. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sherry. Joe?
Yes, hi, good morning. Excuse me. I'm Joe Horowitz. I am the Director of Compliance and Audit for Stetson Cyber Group. My career started off as an auditor with government agencies in New York City. I've done a lot of work with government as internal audit, healthcare, technology companies, ultimately starting off as financial and operational audit, where we were moving our way into information technology and information security audits, and now doing cybersecurity risk assessments, gap analysis. Stetson Cyber Group, we do pen testing, vulnerability assessments as well. We work with some of the school districts across Long Island. We also work with fire departments, municipalities. We work with a lot of different accounting firms, law firms. So we really hit a large range of different industries throughout Long Island. I see some of our clients here today from some of the school districts. It's great to see you all. My certifications are, I'm also a CIA through the IAA. I'm a certified information systems auditor. I'm a certified data protection security engineer. I am also certified in risk management. And I'm not originally just the IT guy. I actually have a degree in finance and accounting. So I have a whole broad range of seeing how everything runs from a holistic standpoint, which helps us when we do our risk assessment with school districts. And we work very well with internal controls, with the auditors, with the data destruction and the law firms. We bring in everybody's collaboratively as well, just to make sure that we're really hitting all the points that all the school districts need.
Thank you, Joe. David?
Good morning. I'm David Faverio from Pupfish Sustainability Solutions. We're a data destruction company. We are AAA NAID certified. You'll hear me say NAID a lot. That's the National Association of Information Destruction. So we are certified in data destruction. We're also an electronics recycler. We have a zero landfill policy. Nothing goes into the landfill. Everything's either repurposed or recycled through an R2 certified recycler back into the manufacturing stream. We're also a certified B Corp. B Corps represent a holistic embrace of corporate good and is the gold standard of socially and environmentally responsible business. So we do our best to help the community and make sure we're always doing the right thing from top to bottom through our organization. We work with all kinds of industries, law firms. We've done pickups at a number of schools. Some of those schools are here. And as Joe said, law firms, accounting firms, finance companies constantly are looking to destroy that sensitive data. And I hope we're able to give you some good information today.
Thank you, David. Matthew.
All right. They left the lawyer for last. So last and certainly not least, I hope, for everybody. But so my name is Matt Maynard, and I have been a lawyer for longer than I care to talk about. But I primarily work in have been primarily working in labor and employment for a long time. And about 5 years ago, somebody came to me in my then firm with a question about Education Law 2D. And then I had to read it and read all the regs and start advising internally my own firm about compliance issues. That's what happens a lot of times when you spend your days reading statutes and interpreting them. So I have spent the last 5 years as a large part of my practice being the point person or one of the point people at both my last firm as well as Gersio and Gersio on issues relating to compliance with Education Law 2D, and then also the practicalities of how you comply. It's not just I, as well as the other lawyers in my firm, like to be practical about these things. We understand what you're doing day to day and what the restraints are on your time and on your resources, and how do you best accomplish compliance with this statute, as well as the general idea of securing the data and information about the students and the parents and the employees that work for you or that work with you. Because I know that there are a lot of people in the room who are not necessarily school district employees. So, and we work with all of the firms up here and all of the companies up here work together, sometimes cooperatively, sometimes we run into each other because we have similar clients, to try and make sure that everybody is doing what they need to do.
Thank you, Matt. And that's actually a great segue. Sherry, my first question is for you. As a partner with Serenity and Associates, how do you collaborate with Stetson and Pupfish and Gersio to protect K-12 data, support schools in achieving New York State Ed Law 2 compliance and any other compliance that they may need to adhere to, such as HIPAA, FERPA?
Right, there's a lot of compliance that's involved, and thank you, Lisa. So as part of the internal auditor role, this is something that came out of the Roslyn debacle, the Roslyn audit, okay. They've always had a claims audit function. It was done by the board, but it turned out that there was collusion going on there, and then that necessitated some kind of oversight from an internal controls perspective, and that's where the internal auditor role got created. So it's a fairly recent role for school districts, and I'm not sure it's being used in the best fashion at some places. It's not a necessary evil. Internal audit really is responsible for looking at your compliance with laws, rules, regulations, policies. So again, your policies that you have in place, certain policies you are required to have. So that's something else that your internal auditors are looking at, specifically that are related to IT. So like a security breach policy is required. It's required by New York State Ed Law, I believe, or technology law, one of those. Anyway, it's the same.
Matt can tell you.
Right.
Yeah, it's the education law.
Education law, right, which is that big book that I usually carry around and I have to respond to quite often. The other part that is involved with internal auditing is operating effectiveness and efficiency. So we're really looking to help advise our clients, in this case, schools, public or private, how you could be doing things in a more effective manner. Right? It all comes down to the third part, which is money, and making sure that you're safeguarding your financial assets. In the old days, computer systems, and I'm talking really a long time ago, you could audit around the system. You cannot audit around the system anymore. So IT is pervasive. We rely on it for our data, for our reporting, for our making management decisions. We have to be transparent as schools, as public schools. As you know, you're supposed to put your financial information, and a lot of things on your website, well, that means you're also exposing yourself as well. Thank you so much. But at the same time, you have to do things in a smart fashion, and that's where we work together. It really should be a collaborative effort. Honestly, I've been doing this for a long time, to advise our districts in different risks that are out there, and managing and avoiding and reducing those risks. And that's where it comes, when we ask these IT questionnaires, because we always have to assess IT every year, all throughout the year. We work, I'm always talking to the IT directors in school districts. Always something is happening. As an external auditor, we do a very robust IT questionnaire, which I have passed, to Joe to make sure, am I asking the right questions? Am I hitting on the right points? To just from the outside shell layer, am I getting, the right information? We also started changing our dialogue with schools. Don't just yes me. Do you have the resources? Do you have the sufficient resources, both in people and in money? Because the budgets in the past, as you know, were not sufficient to address the threats and the risks that are out there. So working together to make sure that, well, how are you destroying your equipment? How are you getting rid of things? Are you really destroying the data properly? Are you protecting against Ed Law 2D? Obviously, we need to be cognizant of that. And then working with legal, we work with insurance carriers as well to make sure we advise them as far as cybersecurity insurance. So it's really a holistic approach in how we can attack and address the risks.
Thank you. Joe?
I just have to say, so when we do our assessments, for those of you who know Ed Law 2D, they require that the school districts take on the NIST framework. Now, it's a lot about controls, right? So when we go in, we really look at the internal audit reports as well, because we want to see that, hey, the policies you're putting in place, the controls you're putting in place, they're being assessed on a regular basis. We're seeing a lot of other internal audit firms that really have very fluff audits that go on with your school districts. I really have these conversations with the school districts we work with to say, hey, sit down with your internal audit teams and tell them to do a real risk assessment of what's going on instead of doing the same old audits all the time, because that's going to get you in trouble, right? They're not finding your problems. We're finding the risk, but are they actually testing what you need to get tested? And then we're going in, we're looking at the data destruction, which is also a big control as part of the data protection within NIST as well. So that really has to be looked at as well. So yes, internal controls are very big for the internal audit teams. Please, if you are a school district, rethink your relationship with your internal auditors. Don't let them mandate the audit, the audit program every year. Work with them to help them mandate what's going to be audited every year.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to actually stick with you and ask, we often hear about data breaches related to third-party vendor misuse, the lack of education surrounding that, and the handling of classified data. You work very closely with districts when creating policy and procedure. Can you discuss how having policy and protocol in place can help circumvent a third-party breach?
Sure. First of all, sorry about the floppy mic. It just keeps going down. Anyway, so I've been working with vendor management probably for about 20 years. That's been pretty much my bread and butter for a lot of times for all the internal audit stuff. And if you really look in the news and you look around, a lot of breaches happen through third-party vendor risks, vendors and their lack of patching of their software. What we're really seeing through all the school districts is that they're allowing the vendors run the relationship. The contracts are with the schools. So when we come in, we're assessing, hey, are you asking them to do certain things? Are they supposed to meet their service level agreements? Are they meeting them? Is anybody checking for this? Is there a policy in place saying, hey, vendor, are you providing me with your security assessments that you're doing, like a SOC 2 report or any kind of internal audit reports to say, hey, I have controls in place to protect the data of your school districts? We're not seeing that. So we're really helping school districts to identify who their vendors are, putting together a vendor management file, right? So vendor master file, excuse me. To identify all the vendors in the district, identifying the risks involved with each vendor, finding out what they have access to, and then saying, hey, start taking over those relationships. Start asking them for those things. If they say no, it's your contract. And we really have to start teaching school districts and any businesses across Long Island and anywhere that the vendor does not run your business. You run your business and you have to manage the relationship. And I know it sounds like a broken record, but this is what you should take away with you when you talk about vendor management. Should we take a question?
This topic came up at the last time we were here.
Yes.
We all use the same programs here. We all do. So on Long Island, there's 150 school districts or so, 750 in the state. So I understand what you're saying, each of us need to control that data, but we're all doing the same exact thing over and over and over. And some of us have 100 different programs. So you want to send that SOC 2 report that's this thick. Next year when I get through it, I'll move on to the next one.
Yeah. So
I'm going to ask you to just hold that thought, though. We will.
The question is, what can the state do? That's what we're here to do, to help us, so we're not all doing the same exact thing over and over and over. Yeah, I brought it up last time.
Let's talk about the SOC 2 report for a second, all right? It's this thick. You know how much of it's actually relevant? This much.
But you got to find it.
No, it's easy to find. It's very easy to find.
So there's 150 of them.
All right, so I've been reading SOC 2. All right, so wait. So I've been reading SOC 2 reports now again for almost 15 years. All right, and every single one, you look at the section where they do the testing and you skim down to see if there are any exceptions. Very easy. You don't even have to read every single one. Once you hit an exception, hey, that's where you identify where their problem areas are. Then there's a section called user consideration controls, which is one page, just one page, that says, hey, to better protect yourself as a school district or a business, these are the controls I need to have in place. And they're usually the same things that we're doing within this framework. Have a policy, have access controls, and have controls over your change management. It's the same control. So it's even 150 pages is a lot of fluff because the CPA firms are charging all that money to do a report. You have to look at it like that. Find those little sections.
They have it, then we should review how they do it too.
Reach out to Joe. He can tell you exactly.
Yeah, but I'm saying is we're all doing the same thing. How can the state, again, may not be you, but how can the state help us? So we're not all doing the same thing over and over and over.
I think we can. We're going
I'm gonna hand this to Laura.
We're going to have Q&A later.
Okay.
I would say let's circle back to this because the new chief privacy officer for New York State agrees with you. She's not clueless about this, and she is searching for a solution that would take that hard work off of you.
Right.
It's not official yet, still in the research phase of this, but she gets it. And it's very comforting, honestly. And I think better things will happen in the future. I know right now that doesn't help you, but when we get to Q&A, we can circle back to this, and I have something I can refer you to, okay?
Thank you, very helpful.
Okay.
So, and also, when you find your critical vendors, when you put together your vendor master file, you won't have to look through 150 reports. You'll have to look at the ones who are. All right, and we'll talk about it further after.
They have data, they're critical.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
That's all of them.
And if you want, I could sit down with you and we can talk about how to better read a SOC 2 report, because yes, at the very beginning you try to read the whole thing. What?
That's only one part of it we have to read.
No, I understand.
Right.
No, I understand.
No, it's a lot.
But that's only one part of it. Again, requiring your vendors to provide policies or whatever they have to prove that they're protecting your data is very important.
If I could just interject, just on that point, when you enter into all of you should be entering into agreements with your vendors. I hope that the answer is yes, right? When you do so, presumably you're bringing your lawyers in, and for the ones that I represent, I know that I'm looking over these. You need to make sure that you have up-to-date current agreements that require compliance, and then you actually have to require the compliance. It's not enough to just have it in writing, because if you get audited, that's nice, you have the paper. What did you do to make sure that this was being enforced? And if you've got nothing, then you've got a big problem.
We will circle back.
Yeah, and I listen, I know that it's all a big circle, right? Because we're coming back to the same issues, but it's important to understand from the get-go, you know, what Joe said, you have to manage these relationships. That starts with having an agreement that you are actually going to have someone looking at and enforcing. And if you don't, if you have a vendor who just doesn't want to get with it, they can't be your vendor anymore. And I understand what that means, But you can't do that. You are exposing not only yourself, but the students, the parents, the employees, everybody in that district is getting exposed because of the conduct of one probably small vendor who just doesn't want to spend the money.
And also think of it as 6 degrees of separation. You have a vendor, they have a vendor, and that data is absolutely available to all of those different people.
I think there was a gentleman with his hand up in the back.
Wait, so if you want, I do have a question about that.
Actually, can we just hold all questions until the Q&A session? Thank you, I appreciate that. David, Pupfish is an electronic data destruction company. How does Pupfish help manage liability and reduce the risk of a data breach? And where might a school begin if they have data and equipment to dispose of?
So I like to say that cybersecurity is a marathon, and these people will all get you the first 26.1 miles protecting your data while it's online. But you need a company that is certified in data destruction to take you to the finish line by destroying that data. You're collecting information on all kinds of people in your schools and associated with your schools, and you're required to protect it from start to finish, not just while it's online. So if it's sitting in a storeroom and somebody has access to it, or somebody, the building gets breached for whatever reason, from a storm, and those items are exposed, and somebody can take them away. There's still data on those devices. So you really need to properly destroy that data, and that's done through a certified data destruction company. There are a lot of companies out there that are recyclers that say they'll protect your data, but they really need to be certified in data destruction to destroy that data properly. So when you look at a company that's, say, AAA NAID certified, every employee who's touching that data and is alone with that data has been background tested, drug tested, has taken an exam on how to properly handle and protect that data. The vehicles are GPS tracked to make sure they're not making any extra stops along the way. The buildings are secure. They're required to have cameras in all areas of the facility. Any place that's touching data, it has to be you have to be able to see people touching that data to make sure they're handling it properly. And then really the most important part for the districts and the schools is the reporting and the certification, because without that you really have no backup if you're ever audited or if there is ever an issue with the data and you need to prove that it was done properly. Detailed reports on devices that were picked up, make, model, serial number, what it is, what the weight is, and if there is a data containing device inside a hard drive, what that is, again, make, model, serial number. So it can all be tracked back in an audit. And then, of course, certification that it was properly destroyed and how it was destroyed or what equipment or software was used to destroy it.
Thank you. Joe, is this part of policy?
Data destruction is part of NIST for data retention, data protection, data backup. So yes, you're going to want to be able to destroy your data information and your hardware properly. We can't tell you how many times we see either printers going out or other machines going out with data that's still on it because nobody thinks that there's data on it, or they're going out to a company that says they're going to destroy the data and then they repurpose the information, this hardware, and there's still data on the machines. So it's really important from the NIST standpoint and from your standpoint to protect the data in that perspective, have a really legitimate company doing that.
Thank you. Do districts have anything to say about third-party vendors and data destruction, or does that not carry through?
That should go.
That should be part of the contract.
Yeah.
As part of the contract, say whether it's a copier, printer that has the data on there, they should have something in their contract that when they take it off premises, they're either leaving you with the hard drive or there's some kind of legitimate wiping of that hard drive before they leave. People don't think that there's data being stored on there, but there's a lot of data being stored in there.
And the data privacy questionnaires also speak to that as well, even if it's software vendors. So what's the data at rest? What happens afterwards? How long are you maintaining that data? What's happening to it at that point?
Right.
So
we often hear data at rest is data at risk, right?
I just want to point out two examples that we had when we picked up equipment. We picked up a large plotter at a school district. And
no names.
No names. And it was assumed there was no data on it by the school, but when we got it back to our facility, we ripped it open, and there was a hard drive in the plotter, which recorded information. So anything that had been copied or printed off of that, there was data on that hard drive, and we were able to remove it. We also did another pickup with charging carts. And they're a bit challenging, and we now ask that the doors be left unlocked or that we get the keys, because we have to, if we get a cart, we assume there's data in it, even though we have been told there wasn't, because we've cut the doors open. We'll use a cutter and actually cut the doors, and we found 3 devices in a charging cart. So you just never know. And we're like that next level. We're trained to really rip things apart, and really make sure nothing is overlooked.
And this is why it's very important for that hardware inventory to be maintained and to know what's on the hardware. When you look at the Center for Internet Security, when they're saying there are 18 main categories, number 1 is hardware inventory. Because one of the things is people don't realize what's going on the hardware and what's going through it. So it's really important to keep that, maintain that, keep a single source. I mean, we see so many places. Business office has one, the IT department has one, and they really don't come together and know what each other has. It doesn't really reconcile all the time. So you don't know what's going on there, and they're not having things like tracking what's going through the hardware devices.
And that speaks to continuity. David, when you receive something from a district or any business organization, and they have that list for you, are you able then to provide information back to them, serialized, to offset that list?
Yeah, we get lists, and it's, every company, every district is different, right? Some are very organized with very detailed lists, some are just very general, and that's fine. And we've only had one pickup, and I think that was at Serini, where everything we expected to pick up was actually there. Every other pickup we've done, whether it's for a district or a company, we'll expect 10 computers, will get 50. A lot of that's because they hear we're in the building and there's a lot of hidden equipment.
A lot of scrambling.
So we do look at what the lists were provided, and then again we do provide a list back to the school or to the company stating what we picked up. And again, it's all serialized, especially on data-containing devices.
Okay. David, thank you. To that point, how does a school get started, or any organization get started, if they want to dispose or destroy their data?
So, I think in terms of the whole process, I think the data destruction process is the easiest part for a school to start with. Right now, you have a process where you go to your board and you have to get approval for the disposal of equipment. Well, that will stay the same. And really, from that point forward, all you need to do is to contact a certified data destruction company. If they are NAID certified.
As they should be.
As they should be. They're doing it the right way every single time. With NAID, you're certified to get into NAID, and then you're certified every year. And part of that certification up front is they'll give us devices that we have to destroy or remove the data from, but they'll also go into our warehouse and they'll pull all kinds of hard drives that we may have sanitized, and they'll also send a bunch of those out to test to make sure that the data is actually off of them also. And that's in addition to the quality control that NAID certified companies are required to do periodically on the devices they're touching. So just by making that call, you kind of know that your devices are being handled properly. And back to NAID, they can knock on our door, any certified company's door today, and say, we want to come in and make sure you're following your procedures. We want to pull some hard drives. They've been known to follow trucks out on pickups to make sure they're handling the pickups properly and they're protecting the equipment from the time they pick it up at the facility, even to the time they get it into their vehicle. So it has to be done properly every single time.
Thanks, David. Back to the process, though, at the school. What process do they follow if they have equipment?
Again,
do they need to take an inventory of it? Do you go in and take the inventory? How is that done?
It happens a lot of different ways. So sometimes, again, we'll get a very detailed list. Sometimes we'll get a general list. Sometimes it'll be photos. We have this pile of stuff, and we need to get rid of it.
And you work that way?
We sure do.
Okay.
Because it happens all the time. I'd rather get a photo sometimes than a list, because at least I can see the equipment and see how big it is, and we can properly staff the job and make sure we have the right vehicles going out there. Sometimes a list does not do that for us, depending if it's how detailed it is. But from that point forward, again, you hand it to us and then we'll take care of it, or you hand it to a certified company and they'll take care of it for you from that point forward.
Okay, and I suppose that's the difference between data destruction and recycling. Like
Yeah,
a
well,
recycler.
with a recycler, you never know what's happening, right, with that information. I've heard horror stories of 26-foot trucks pulling up in front of schools, they load them up and they drive away, and that's the last they hear of them. That's not a good thing. You want to make sure that you kind of know what's being taken, or at least what was taken. A lot of times we'll go into, again, companies and schools that you all kind of work the same, where some are have things more organized than others, and it'll just be a pile of stuff and we'll remove it. But at least you'll get a report back telling you exactly what we picked up.
Very good. Thank you, David. My next question actually is for Joe. Joe, you've spoken a lot about social media and a school district or an organization's responsibility when sharing student data, photos, names, images on social media. Can you speak a little bit about that? And then, Matt, I'm going to ask as a follow-up for you to just discuss the law and New York State Ed Law 2D compliance when it comes to that.
Sure. So there's a lot of conversations going around the privacy groups now, talking about how school districts like to post pictures of the students doing stuff on Twitter or Instagram or any of these social media sites. But what they're doing is they're not only posting the pictures, but they're also posting usually their first name. Sometimes they're posting what classroom they're in. And there's questions of whether or not now this could lead back to any other information that about the student. So it's really, it's becoming a legal thing, I think, going on now, where they're wondering why are they posting all this information about a student online? Why is it needed? And how is that also, how are you going to protect yourself from data that's being taken from the student if you're giving it all away freely online? I mean, I see it for so many different school districts where they're just like, they give out the kid's name and his first initial of his last name. So it's very easy to track back who that kid is and the family and all that information if they do get it. So it's really, it's one of those things where I think schools have to be a little bit more diligent about really posting kids. I mean, these are still minors too you're posting pictures of, regardless of them being your school district. I mean, I thought back in the, and this is again going to be a question for legal, but what's the liability of posting minors' pictures online social media without, maybe they don't even know, or the parents aren't on social media to know that their kids' pictures are being posted?
Or even if they've signed disclosures.
Right.
Yeah.
I know a lot of schools
They do.
give that to them. But even at that point, if there is some type of breach or some type of cyber attack,
Right.
what is the law surrounding it?
And that also goes, Matt, to what's on their website too. District websites, on district minutes, we troll the minutes. We see student names. We see information.
Last names
accolades.
included.
Also, just the photos that are on there too. GoFundMe is another one, by the way. Go ahead.
So I was just saying, welcome to the wonderful interplay of the law and then the real world, right? Because I may or may not have suggested to several districts over the years that it's not the best idea in the world to share information through social media or on their website. However, I live in the real world where you need to do that. There's reasons why districts do that. Some of that is to celebrate the achievements of students in the district, of employees in the district, right? And of families within the district. So there's a need and a desire to do that because it's a good thing, right? We're not doing anything negative, but how do you balance that with what inevitably happens out in the world? I can tell you just on a personal level, my wife no longer shares photos of our children on any of her social media. Why? Because my wife's also an attorney and she's a criminal defense attorney, and she has seen far too many strange things that people do with photos that they capture off the internet. So, a number of years ago, she just made that choice and told me, maybe you should not post pictures of the kids. So there is, from a legal perspective, it's really difficult if a school district is posting a picture of a child on social media, kids at a sporting event, right? A team, and they won a championship and you post a picture of the team. You don't put the names out there, but somebody then uses the photo for some ill-gotten gain. Is there liability? Probably not, but it does make you think a little bit about what you're doing and what information you're sharing. Names, making it easier for people to identify who the student is really something you should try to avoid. Why? Because now you're giving away information. And generally speaking, bad actors have become more sophisticated over the years. They take one piece of information from X, they get one piece from Y, one piece from Z, and now they put it all together because they're more sophisticated about this. All right, so really want to be careful about what it is you're sharing. The other thing, I assume everyone in the room is familiar enough with Education Law 2D at this point. They know generally what it is. But what I try to tell everybody that I talk to about it is it's not so cut and dry. It's a continuum. You have to identify on an ongoing basis issues, risks, exposures, and take affirmative steps to fix them. And it's not like that. I used to deal with some folks who thought, well, just do this and it'll take care of everything. No, it doesn't. Not everything is solvable in 2 minutes. The lawyer can't fix your problem every single time you ask. That's just not the way it works, even though I'm sure most people would like it to be that way. But you need to, the main takeaway on 2D is to understand that it's an ongoing interactive process between you as the sort of holder of the information and everyone that you deal with that comes into contact, including, by the way, your lawyers. 2D applies to me as a lawyer. I have to make sure that I'm safeguarding the information I come into contact with, right? I'm handling a disciplinary matter involving a student, a teacher's interaction with a student. I have all sorts of information about this student. What am I doing to make sure that I'm safeguarding what information I have, right? It's not just you. The burden, and it's a big one, right? We all know that. It's a big burden, but it's shared by multiple people. You need to make sure you're managing how that's done and how we continue to know that this is something that we need to keep an eye on and how we're doing it. And it's really hard. And everybody who I think does this knows it's really hard. So sometimes you'll get criticism. I've criticized clients about the way they're doing things and they sort of ball up, well, why are you, just stop just criticizing and give me answers. It's not that simple. But don't take the criticism as anything other than trying to help you work through what we need to do. There are some things that are easier than others. So understanding that and understanding it's a process and not just a simple yes or no kind of question where I can just push a button and make the problem go away. As long as you understand that and you're committed to the process, that's a good first start. That's where you get in the right mindset, and then you can start doing and achieving the sort of things that you need to achieve to getting compliance.
Thank you, Matt. Joe?
Right, and this is why risk assessments are very important to do annually. Risk changes every time you do a risk assessment. 1 year, your risk might be a financial risk. 1 year, it might be a cyber risk. 1 year, it might be a vendor risk. Unless you do these risk assessments on a regular basis, you're not going to address the actual risk to your districts. This is what companies do throughout the country, throughout the world, because they know that risk is always changing.
What does a risk assessment look like? Can you describe that?
Sure. So what you basically will do is you'll look at the entire operations of your district, of your organization. You'll map it against all the major risks that are out there to see, do you have the controls in place to protect yourself or to lessen the risk that is the highest risk to your district. You'll work with a firm like us, or you work with your auditors to identify where do I have my problems, and how do I fix those, and what do I need to put in place to really, again, nothing's 100% effective. We'd love it to be 100% effective, but the more that you put controls or put something in place to lessen that risk, the more that you can sleep better at night, I would like to say. So it's really important to look at this on an annual basis.
Thank you. Matt, as a follow-up, you've explained New York State Ed Law 2D and Part 121. Can you explain who compliance is mission critical for? Who must comply with Ed Law 2D?
So I think everybody understands that Education Law 2D applies to school districts, right? So that's the easy part. Who else does it apply to? Well, it applies if you are a private school, right? Doesn't necessarily apply unless you receive some state aid. It also applies to you if you have a contract with a school district to the extent that you have contracts that cause you to interact and receive data and information from the school district. Well, now it might apply to you, and it certainly applies to the students for whom you're receiving information. Vendors, right? We talked a little bit, there was some discussion about vendors before. You have all sorts of outside vendors that you bring in as a school district. I mentioned lawyers, right? Your accountants, your occupational therapists that you bring in, your physical therapists, interpreters, anybody and everybody that you might bring in to provide a service to a student or to the district is someone who is going to have access to information that is protected by Education Law 2D. It is literally everyone you bring in from the outside. They get any kind of access that you give them. It's a window or a door, I should say, into your system. Even if it's just a small door, it's still a way in, and you now have to make sure that all of these vendors are complying. So it's everybody you're interacting with. Even the folks you might not think, well, I mean, these professional providers, there was a long time, I mentioned to someone earlier, there was a long time where there was a consensus, and I have no idea why, but there was a consensus that this law didn't apply to law firms. And I remember that because that was the first question I got asked about 2D. That was someone came to me and said, what do you think about this? And I said, well, why are you asking me this? This is such an obvious question. And they said, well, a whole bunch of these law firms got together and said it doesn't apply to them. And I laughed and said, well, they're wrong. much to the chagrin of people within my own firm. And by the way, not the firm
not Gercio and Gercio.
It is not Gercio and Gercio. I was at another firm for a long time and came to Gercio recently. But I remember the sort of, well, what are you talking about? Everybody agrees it doesn't apply. And I just said, yeah, they're wrong. I'm right about this. And my old firm then took the approach of, well, okay, what do we have to do? Because people just didn't realize how much information the lawyers had. Well, it doesn't matter. We do work, we have information, we have to protect it.
And I think it all comes down to education.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, any information you share personally identifiable information.
Not your education, but the education pertaining to, explaining what the law means and who it applies to.
Absolutely.
And that's really why we do these panels and try to be as informative as possible.
Absolutely. If someone doesn't think it applies to them, you've got an uphill battle, because it does. And even if it doesn't, let me just step away from the legal part, now the practical part. Even if it doesn't, you as a school district probably want them to comply with these requirements for practical reasons, right? Just think about what happens if you have a vendor and it doesn't apply, 2D technically doesn't apply to them, and you don't really require them to take any of these safeguards, and oops, they get breached. And it comes back to the district. You're going to have to explain to your parents why their child's information got shared, and they're not going to accept, well, this law that you know about that requires all of these things, and you didn't require it of this vendor, but you require it of everybody else. They're not going to understand the nuance there. And they're right. Practically speaking, I'm a parent, right? I have 2 kids. I don't want my school sharing my children's information without ensuring that their information is safeguarded. So there's practical, right? That's the practical piece of this. Even if it doesn't apply to them, it does, because you're going to want it. Because it gives you security, and it gives your parents, and it gives your students the security they deserve.
Thank you, Matt. Michael Halpern with Solaris Technologies is in the audience, and I apologize for putting you on the spot, Michael, but this is a conversation you and I have had many times. I know you have some of your own clients in the room that many of our panelists work with as well. Can you explain why schools that are not mandated to follow New York State Ed Law 2D, where they may be a private school or a Catholic school or religious affiliated, without receiving any kind of subsidy from the state, may still adhere to these laws?
First, thank you for asking, because it is important.
I'm actually going to give you the mic. Is that okay?
I'll project. I have kids as well. I think I know the So the way you have to look at it is if cybersecurity insurance is going to look at you, I mean, we're all familiar with that. And if there's a guideline that's out there that you're not following, you're either not going to get the insurance or you're going to have to pay more for it. So it's silly that way. And also, if there's guidelines out there already, why wouldn't you adhere to them just to protect your students, the families that you represent, so on and so forth? But ROI, like, we're all here trying to stretch the dollar and make sure it works moving forward. If you have a 3-year plan and how you're starting to implement your cyber, your IT, and there's somebody telling you from a governing body, this is the way you should set up. The last thing you want to do is start setting up a certain way and then reinventing the wheel 6 months out, 18 months out, because now it is mandated to you. You'd rather swing the pendulum to more of the stricter side now. Again, better insurance prices, better practices. You can tell your board, you can tell the students, hey, we did everything we could. I think that's most important. And you look at the team up there, and they're covering it from every angle. You have guidelines, follow them, right? So just because you're lucky enough not to be mandated doesn't mean you shouldn't look at them that way. That's the best way I would look at it. Of course.
Thank you. And our panelists work directly with these school districts, not necessarily districts, but also private schools as well, and other institutions that touch the districts in one way or another. Can you comment briefly on what Michael shared?
Yeah, right. So that goes into the audit side of things. So we, on the external audit kind of review that we do, it's a pretty robust questionnaire, and we're asking a lot of those things. It's an assessment, but it's asking about your access permissions. It's asking about your access protocols, your controls, your password, passphrases. Where do you stand on protecting data? Do you even have an understanding of what kind of data that you have, and that how does it have to be protected? I think that's really important to classify your data so that you know what you have and know how it should be protected and who it should be communicated with. It's sort of like a child, when it goes to play with other people, when it goes and has a sleepover at somebody's house, what happens to it? The data at this point when it comes back. Looking at backup and recovery and restore procedures, that's all critical and all part of the fabric of the continuity. So that goes down to business continuity, not just disaster recovery, but business continuity of your operations, incident response. These are all part of things that are embraced in Ed Law 2D and the NYS cybersecurity framework. So these things should really be, part of the fabric of your organization. They cost money, and that's the conversation that we're having. We report to the board, so it's really important that you communicate these things properly to us so that we can, and then in turn, inform the board, no, you're not, making sure that the budget's there, appropriately to mitigate these risks, as was said before. Inventory is also part of Ed Law 2D too. You have to understand your hardware, your data, your inventory protocols. Do you have a really good system? Do you have documentation? In the audit world, if it is not documented, it did not happen. Okay, when somebody's going to do a data destruction, when we do an audit of inventory, and one of my clients is here, we did that review not too long ago, making sure that you have very, very good inventory records, where you can kind of merge that in with your purchasing information so that you really have a good understanding. Was this a good vendor to work with? Was it a good product? That's really all important, and when you're destroying stuff, we want to make sure that it's off the records appropriately as well. Software, that comes back to data privacy agreements as well. We'll be looking at that. Looking also at, do you have an understanding of what software that you have out, and you're using in your organization, district, school, whatever. You're paying for things that are free. We would say nothing is free. There's a cost to it. That means they're taking data from you. Understand that and make sure that your privacy agreement's there. As auditors, we've gone in and we've seen redlining on the data privacy agreements that come back. Make sure that you are looking for that they're not just signing them and you didn't see that they crossed out certain sections or added their own, and making sure from a legal perspective that that's in compliance with the law. And also disposal. So all those things tie into the whole, what we do as an auditor and what we're looking at, and we're using the NIST guidelines as a standard.
Thank you, Sherry. We're coming up on the 9 o'clock hour. I just have one more question for the panel, and this pertains to liability. Who is ultimately responsible
I mean,
for data protection?
Well,
whether it's data destruction or data privacy, data protection, who is liable and who's responsible?
Everybody in the organization, but
I was going to say, what?
You talk about the legal perspective.
Yeah, David just said that sounds like a lawyer question, and it is, right? So there's a couple of different layers to this, but primarily compliance with Education Law 2D and its regulations falls on the school district, right? So,
and if we're not talking about a district, let's just in general terms.
The entity who is needing to comply, right? So I'm using a school district, but let's say it's a private school who's complying with it, right? You do? Okay, well, let's say the breach is much lower down the chain. It's not district-wide, it's one vendor, right? Well, the subcontractor, let's say you have one contractor and they subcontract it out. Well, those two entities, and it just goes up. Where's the breach? We go up the chain. Everybody has some role to play and some liability for whatever the breach may be. And these are entity level liabilities. What are the potential liability? Well, guess what? If you're a contractor with a school and you engage in conduct that results in a breach, the worst thing that can happen to you is they can pull your ability to work with schools. That is for those of you whose primary mode of income is providing services to schools, that is a business killer. They can ban you for a period of 5 years. The reality, they do it once, you're done, forever.
So if you are a transportation company, correct, or a textbook vendor.
And right, you can be, the penalties can range from just a simple fine and a slap on the wrist to a ban. Well, if they ban you from working with schools, and all you do is work with schools, you're done. And even if when the ban is over, because it's a time limit, you're never coming back. No one's ever going to touch you again, because they're never going to be able to trust, because, by the way, most of these vendors will have entered into agreements by which they say they're complying and providing security, and oops. Now, the penalties depend on how inadvertent or how deliberate the breach is. There are times in which you can do almost everything right and still get breached. You're not going to be sitting there with the largest and most expansive penalties if you've done everything that you can do, right? But if you don't, then the penalties are going to be worse. Is there individual liability? No, but guess what? For those of you who are with public school districts, well, and even private schools, you have constituents that you answer to, don't you? Right? We have school board members. I believe they're elected, aren't they? The individuals holding places in the administration have contracts. They are going to be answerable to school boards, to the community, and that pressures all kinds of different, that's not a legal liability, but it's a practical problem that many of you will face. Many of you in the room are administrators. You know that in certain instances, the pressure of the community is going to lead to some sort of action by a school board. School board members, right? They can be voted out. So depending on just how expansive the breach and how you either did or didn't proactively engage in conduct to prevent it, or how you respond to it, will dictate what the consequence is on an individual level.
That's important, and that hasn't been touched on yet, because everybody here is talking about prevention and everything else. But if it's inevitable that you may or may, you can do all the right things and still happen, but how quickly you find out that you were breached and what you do with it is just as important as setting up for it. I mean, you really have to make sure that when this happens, what parameters, what checks do you have in place? What have you set up to make sure that You know, if it does happen, we're going to find out quickly, isolate it, and make sure it doesn't infiltrate everything there. Those are all questions that will be asked post, you know, when it happened. So you can have all the greatest things in place, but make sure that there is some kind of system in place to make sure if it does happen, how quickly you can control it.
Right.
Michael, that's an excellent point. And Joe, you speak to that in terms of policy. I would also ask, Joe, please make your point. And then if Matthew, you could just speak to exactly who that first phone call should be to and why. I think our audience members would appreciate that as well.
So from a legal compliance standpoint, we'll get you there for EdLaw 2D, and that's one thing. We'll put you in the right direction from a technology and non-technology controls. But there really needs to be a cultural and mentality shift. I think that is the biggest change in a lot of the school districts. We need to stop thinking of ourselves, hey, we're a school, nobody's after us. Everybody's after you. You're the #1 industry because you're a one-stop shop for information, from students to parents to teachers, administrators, board members. You have a lot of information they want, and they're attacking you daily. So the mentality has to change, the culture change. When we do our trainings for the teachers, the eyes that open when they go, oh my God, I never even thought of that they go after all this information, how they're doing it. It really has to come down from not just, hey, we're going to come in and put controls in place to stop it from a technology perspective. It's not an IT issue. It's an everybody issue to really protect what's going on out there.
So, I think everyone in this room already knows what I'm about to say about who your first call is. But what I would say is before you call your lawyer, the first communication is whatever the crisis response team is in your school or entity, whoever that is, and all of you have someone designated by your policies. If it's a 5-person group, those 5 people all need to know what's going on immediately. Once they're aware, then the first outside call should really be your lawyer, because your lawyer is going to presumably have been involved with the creation of the policy, knows what the policy is, and can help you navigate. Where do you go next? There's more to these problems than just the IT piece of this, right? You're going to have to communicate this to people in your constituents. So navigating you through that process, communicating with the balance of the public, communicating internally. Oftentimes these may wind up being either vendor problems and you now have a breach of contract with your vendor, or they may be employee problems and you need your lawyer because you've got an employee problem. So of course the lawyer is going to tell you to call the lawyer, right? But in this instance, it really is the first person you should call, because they are one of several people who are going to help walk you through what comes next.
And also it encapsulates that conversation in a client, attorney-client privilege.
Right, it's also privileged, so that's also a good thing, because you don't want information out there until it's time to actually communicate it, which, by the way, is going to happen quickly. Sitting on these kinds of things, first of all, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. But you don't want to do that for all sorts of reasons. The more information you hide and choose not to share, the less trust your constituents have in you.